I Have a Dream was a speech given by Martin Luther King Jr. during the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom on August 28, 1963. This was during the huge civil rights movement that was going on in America. His goal was to get civil and economic rights for African Americans, and to put an end to the rampant racism and segregation in the United States at the time. I will be analyzing how King uses ethos, which is the appeal to ethics and credibility, pathos, the appeal to emotion, and logos, the appeal to logic in his speech. First is ethos, which is the appeal to ethics and credibility. And while King is already a very well-known and popular speaker, he still uses ethos in his introduction by bringing up a famous moment in history when he says, "50 years ago, a great American, in whose symbolic shadow we stand today, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This monumentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity." This is mentioning Abraham Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation. Both are very well-known parts of American history that tie into his argument on racial equality, and how even though the slaves were freed, African Americans aren't treated with equality at the time. Mentioning these things help show the audience he knows what he is talking about, which strengthen his argument and his credibility. Second is pathos, the appeal to emotion. Since this speech tackles a topic that was and still is very emotional for a lot of people, he uses it a lot. For example, he uses pathos in this quote: "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." This helps make the audience feel for his cause, hence is talking about children and how people are judged by how they look instead of who they are, which makes the audience feel bad and agree this needs to change. Another example of pathos in this speech is when he says, "I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trial and tribulation. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution, staggered by the winds of police brutality." This talks about some of the struggles people have gone through when fighting for equality, as well as the lengths that are gone to keep them silenced. This makes it clear how much people want this, so you feel sympathetic, and it makes you more invested in the cause. Finally is logos, the appeal to logic. This is often one of the more important appeals, since it is hard to argue with logic. King uses logic a lot in this speech, since he is fighting the illogical idea of racism and segregation. An example of this is when he says, "We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now, that this is no time to engage in the luxuries of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism." Here he talks about how the civil rights movement can't wait any longer, and that any delay would just lead to more suffering of African Americans. Because at the time there were many segregation was rampant. And bringing this up makes his argument stronger and also harder to dismiss. So, in conclusion, Martin Luther King Jr. effectively used ethos, pathos, and logos to successfully argue his point. He uses them so well, in fact, that this has become one of the most well-known speeches in history.